Welcome to Inside the Firm, a podcast dedicated to small business owners and hosted by entrepreneurs, Alex Gore and Lance Cayko. Each week, they take you on their journey of how to start, run, and grow a business by bringing you inside their architecture and real estate development firm. Get a behind-the-scenes tour of how these business leaders manage their clients and foster company culture while creating new and innovative projects. And now your hosts, Alex Gore and Lance Cayko.
Welcome to a special episode of Inside the Firm. This week, our firm had a company outing in the afternoon, so instead, I'm going to share with you a very special interview I did with Bob Fisher, Principal and Editor-at-Large at DesignIntelligence. And Bob and I had a great conversation. If you don't know what DesignIntelligence is, they are an independent company that is dedicated to the business success of organizations in architecture, engineering, construction, and design. Bob and I had a great discussion, and in the end, he ended up turning around the interview on me and became the interviewer, and I became the interviewee. And it was fun. And it was, I think, I shared some things I probably maybe wouldn't share with Alex because he just already knows, where I'm at with certain things, right? So enjoy. But before we get started, do you know what many professionals in architecture dread? Editing down a manufacturer's specification. You're staring down a 54-page specification and you only want one product and all of its attributes? There's a better way. And it's not throwing the entire specification into your project's documents. It's ArchCAD's Spec Wizard. Spec Wizard is a patented, one-of-a-kind automated spec writing tool that allows you to specify a product in minutes, not hours. Just select the products and options you want to specify and generate a 3-part CSI spec in your choice of formats. Best of all, it's free and requires no registration. So go to arccat.com today, that's ARCAT.com, and start building better content today. Welcome to the podcast today, Bob.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I know we tried to get you on a couple of weeks back, and the schedule's just been hectic and crazy. But I'm glad to have you on. So tell me, why don't you just kick us off by telling me a little bit about DesignIntelligence, because I took a look at your guys' website, was very intrigued by all of the things you do, but then more intrigued by your background and what you did at Cartoon Network. I think it's totally cool, and now how you're kind of flowing in and out all over the design world.
Well, you've asked a couple of different questions, and they take a little bit of time to answer, but I'll be as succinct as I can. So I'll start with DesignIntelligence. So we're in our 25th year, and we are essentially a business of design organization. We have 4 different practice areas that we're in. DesignIntelligence is the name of the umbrella organization. So the first of those practice areas is called the Design Futures Council. And the Design Futures Council has been around as long as we have, and it's essentially a leadership organization for those who are leaders in architecture, engineering, construction, design and architecture education, as well as a few leaders from places like technology firms and building product manufacturers who come together as kind of a network of people who have a tremendous amount of influence in shaping the industry to talk about topics that are of strategic importance to people in leadership positions. So some examples of those are technology, applied innovation, sustainable design and construction, education, talent strategies throughout the life of a firm, as well as, generally speaking, the business of running a professional practice. So those issues and topics that we're talking about connect a lot of the other areas of what we do. The next practice area that we have is called DesignIntelligence Research. So we have a research group that does a combination of research that we make available publicly. Some of it we charge for, some of it we don't, and research that we do that's privately commissioned by firms and organizations. So one example of a public piece of research that many people are familiar with is we have a comprehensive compensation benchmarking report that a lot of folks use to help them figure out how it is that they're going to compensate the talent that's within their firms. Then an example of a piece of privately commissioned research is we we recently did a project with Tarkett, the flooring company. I don't know if you're familiar. On equity, diversity, and inclusion in the design and construction professions. And we also do a lot of other things that fall under the realm of practice management. So it could be a market analysis, it could be executive compensation. It sounds like you're a dog fan too.
Yeah, I'm actually going to close the door to our office because they get a little crazy. We live in the country, and so it's there's always people walking around. We have this neighborhood, and there's other dogs, so they go a little nuts.
I understand completely, and I'm a dog lover myself. So anyway, we have our research group, and we do this. We do public and privately commissioned research. Then we have a media arm, and that media group publishes our research and our thought leadership content. We have 3 different major publications that we put out there. One of them is called the DesignIntelligence Quarterly, and that one is actually free and open to the public, available through our website. And then we have what's called DesignIntelligence Strategic Advisors, which is where we work individually with firms on issues and topics that they're trying to work through, so that they can thrive as businesses. And I wear a hat in each of those different areas. So that's a pretty busy thing.
That is a very busy thing. Yeah, I know what it's all about to wear that many hats. You kind of touched on one of the things I wanted to ask you about was I don't know if you can speak about it, and if you can't, then I would ask it in the phrase of public, what you could speak about publicly. Can you talk about what your favorite privately commissioned study has been, or if not, then publicly?
Well, I can tell you about kind of the categories. Actually, yeah. I have a great passion for research, right? So I have a very unusual educational background in that my undergraduate work was a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Painting, Printmaking, and Sculpture, and my master's degree is in business.
Interesting.
When I went through my education, that was quite an unusual combination. But what I really developed an appreciation for in graduate school was the rigor of research. And one of the things that I'm very excited about that's happening increasingly in the practice of architecture is serious research that is going into helping inform better creative decisions, right? So it's in some ways it's like saying, which one of your kids is your favorite? There are certain types of I enjoy working on all the research that we do. Some things that I find a little bit, personally more enjoyable is I like a lot of the marketing-based stuff. I love going out to clients, for example, and finding out what they really care about, what it is that they feel about their relationships with the firms that they work with. Because we're in a unique position because we get to go out and we get the truth, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's really hard when you're in a firm, as you and I'm sure many of your listeners know, to have an accurate idea of what's important to the marketplace and what is it that my clients truly think, what is it that they truly value, and how is it that I explain what I do in terms that really touch on what's important to clients and what it is that they value.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we started our firm 10 years ago from scratch, and we had no clients. And I think the reason why you're spot on about that is because we're just saying when you first start out, or even maybe into your tenure and things get slow, you're just happy to have work. I think being able to have and do a study like that and really understand exactly where the market is at and how you can perform for it is invaluable. And I'm glad to hear that there's people out there like you guys doing that sort of thing. Would love to see if we could partner up in the future in some point like that, because we're about hitting our 10-year mark where we're thinking of kind of transforming, growing up, so to speak, a little bit more. We didn't even start out with a business plan. We still don't have a business plan. We have just been doing we have just concentrated on trying to do fundamental things correctly in the best sort of way, and just best practices and honing our systems in. But we have never really written out a business plan. And I know that was one thing I listened to you today on Mark's podcast, the Ontario Architect podcast, episode 48, I believe. If you haven't listened to that, everybody who's listening here, check that out. But the idea that every architect should be telling a story through their business plan is super important. I think overlooked.
It absolutely is. And, I think people sometimes have maybe a misperception or an inaccurate idea of what a business plan is. And I don't know if you would agree with this, having been at your practice now for 10 years, but running a business is an extremely creative thing to do, right? The beauty of an architecture practice is that you get to enjoy the creativity of building the business, but you also get to enjoy the creativity of what it is that you do for your clients, right?
Absolutely. There's creativity on all kinds of different levels, from the way you market yourself, the way you don't market yourself, client problems come up, and how do you solve those? How do you go after a certain project in a creative way to kind of to beat the competition? I mean, the way you handle emails, on and on and on. Yeah, it's not just it's a design. I mean, I think one of our episodes that we've done is even called Design Your Business, or Design Your Life. And that's sort of one of the things we sort of live by is if you're designing all of these systems, and you can have things to fall back on like templates for proposals or the way, again, even email templates, it streamlines things, which kind of leads me to another question I was hoping to ask you is, do you have any favorite productivity tools out there right now that you would like to recommend to people? One of the beautiful things about technology is like you can automate things at this point. While it scares some people, I think it really helps small to medium firm architects act like a bigger firm.
I do have two, but they might be kind of unusual based on what some other guest would come on and recommend.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Well, so the first one is Onenote. It's a Microsoft product. And I have found that it has been invaluable for me in two ways. One is that I capture more of the ideas that I have, and two, I can capture them in virtually any way that I want to express them, right? I can type something out. I can record a soundbite. I can put photographs in there and draw on top of them. It's a very flexible tool that allows me to capture ideas when I have them, because I can also do it from any kind of mobile device or a desktop. So I find that I don't lose as many ideas, right? I don't know if you've ever had a wonderful idea and you don't get to scroll it down one time, and then all of a sudden it's gone, and you have to try to recreate it if you hope to. So
I think we all have. I'm in the process of sort of outlining a book, and there's been a couple times where I'm like, what I try to do is name the chapters, and there's sort of a theme from there. And there's been a few times where I haven't had my phone on me or something, and it just kills me because I know that the idea that I came up with was something I could at least expand on.
And we all hate that feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so a tool like Microsoft OneNote, or as I understand it, Evernote is a very similar kind of tool. It's such a wonderful productivity tool because it allows you to capture more of the ideas that you have. And the second tool recommendation that I have fits perfectly with what you just said about writing a book. Right? So I happen to be a better kind of off-the-cuff speaker than writer. Right? I mean, all of us have our different ways that we learn, and all of us have our different ways that we communicate. I happen to be someone who does pretty well with verbal communication and visual communication. So what I do in order to be able to produce more content is I will actually just scroll down a quick outline, and it usually comes in the form of a mind map. And then I will record myself talking about what that mind map is. So let's take your book as an example. Let's say you wanted to make some quick progress that was relatively painless in get into a first draft of one of your chapters.
Mm-hmm.
So if I were doing that, if I were going through that process, what I would do is I would create a big mind map, if you know what that is, of the content for whatever chapter it was that I wanted to work on. And then I would simply record myself explaining what was in that mind map, including all those things that come to mind as you're speaking about something that you might not have thought of when you were putting together that original outline. Take that recording, and there's an online service called rev.com, and you have two different choices of how to get that transcribed. Right? You can have a human being do it for about $1 a minute, and the accuracy is great. The turnaround time is quite fast. I think it takes them about 24 hours. And they've just debuted a second option, which is automated transcription, which takes about 15 minutes and is 10 cents a minute, but it's only about 80% accurate. So if you want to cut through that stage where you are just getting things out of your head and on paper or on screen, where you can then refine the ideas and move them around and get them to really crystallize and make sense, that's a fantastic tool if you're comfortable in front of a microphone, and clearly you are.
Oh, I love that. I love that for the book. Man, I could just be walking around the block and kind of start outlining the chapters, literally just telling a story. And because largely it's going to be a collection of personal stories, starting from how I got into the industry, where I grew up and what that all sort of means socially, economically, and everything like that. Was it rev.com? Is that what you said? R-E-V?
Yes.
Okay. I'll have to check that out.
I recommend them enough where you would think that I was, that I worked for them.
Yeah.
That tool. And the same thing with either Evernote or Onenote. Those have been extraordinarily important to me, and then actually others at DesignIntelligence to make us more productive. But you've made me curious about a couple of things. I don't know if I know you're here to interview me, but I've got some questions about what you've got going on.
Yeah, sure. Shoot from the hip. My business partner Al Gore, he's usually on the podcast with me, but he had a baby, so I would love to have a dialogue with you.
Oh, fantastic. Well, good luck to Al.
Yeah, just a second. He's doing well.
Very good. Great to hear. So one of the things that I learned when I was taking a look at your website is that you're involved with not only construction and architecture, but also development. If I remember correctly from what I read, you personally were in construction before you got into architecture. So I've got questions on a couple of different levels on that.
Yeah.
One is, how does your experience in construction change or affect the way that you the work that you do as an architect? Is one. And then how is it that your involvement in all three of these areas shapes your business?
Great question. The first one I can answer in two different ways, and that is, to back up, I tried to work on the farm for one summer. I grew up between a ranch and a farm, really poor rural area in North Dakota, so there wasn't a lot of opportunity, and that was the first opportunity for employment. And I'd always been such a little entrepreneur. Like one of the first things I did, even before I actually tried to do, farm work, like on an hourly basis, was picking choke cherries. So there's this giant choke cherry tree that my grandmother had, and I picked them. I picked like a couple 5-gallon buckets, and they took me to the farmer's market, and that's kind of how I figured out how to. Oh wow, you can take raw resources and make money, and so tried to work on the farm for one summer. And it was a sugar beet farm. And in North Dakota, it is it's 100% humidity, 100 degrees, and the mosquitoes are worse than anywhere. I mean, I've been in the middle of the Amazon jungle. There are no mosquitoes there. North Dakota is where it's at. So I tried that for just a couple weeks, and I hated it. And you had to wake up really late in the night to go change the irrigation water. And my dad's best friend was a contractor, and so I called him up. And I said, hey, I'll pick up trash all day. I don't care. I want to go into and try this construction thing out. So we he hired me. I think I got $7.25 an hour. I was the gopher on site, so to speak. And we tore off and put on one roof every single day, just single family, asphalt shingles. And I fell in love with it. I love the culture. I love the guys custom swearing on site, the masculinity of it all, and then being able to see the progress. Take things off, put things on, and do skillful things with your hands in a craftsman-like way. And so every single summer I would try to get in with a different general contractor to learn a different trade. So one year was roofing, like I talked about. 1 year was just concrete. 1 year was framing. 1 year was all finish work, et cetera, et cetera. I was actually a pretty poor student in high school, just because I went to a very small school. I graduated with 19 people, and you didn't have any choices of your classes. And I'm such a contrarian that if I don't have choices and I don't get to do what I want, then I just lose interest. So after high school, I said, well, I at least got to have some kind of degree. So I went to tech school in North Dakota State School of Science in Wapaton, and went for building construction technology, which is basically teaches you how to be probably about a Class B level contractor, not Class A where you can build skyscrapers, but you learn residential, light commercial, how to set steel, how to do concrete even more. You get certified in the flat work and everything. It was great. And I actually became a good student. Was on the dean's list every semester. And then actually, since I loved school so much, one day I was looking at the blueprints, and they actually were blueprints too, even though it wasn't that long ago, like 20 years ago. Looking at them, and I said to myself, well, why did they draw this house the way they did it? And I had more and more questions, and I thought, well, I really liked school. I figured out how to put myself through school working and with scholarships, and basically kind of made I was getting kind of paid to do it. I mean, I had that much scholarship money coming in, and I was, doing the part-time stuff. That I went up and applied up the road 75 miles north to North Dakota, NDSU, North Dakota State University. Applied to their architecture program, got accepted, and again excelled. But the first part, the biggest struggle I had at the beginning was I had all that construction knowledge, and everything I wanted to design was way too practical. And when you go through the ringer in the first 2 or 3 years in design school, it seems like, no matter what it is, even industrial design, it's all, the philosophy has to come through, and it's more about being loose and free and not caring about the constructability. That was the biggest hurdle from the beginning, and I was terrible. I was not a good architecture student, design-wise, because of that in the first couple of years. And I finally broke through that after I got my butt kicked enough times in design critiques, to where I loosened up, and I just made up. I was convinced, okay, it doesn't have to be constructible at this point. And one of the best professors, he's still a very good friend, Daryl Booker. I had his studio for the first and second studios, and he told me to let go, and that I needed to let go, and that don't worry, just keep all of this construction knowledge in the back of your head. And he said, right now it's all about, you need to learn design. You need to learn design. You need to be a good architect. It's all, humanity needs good design. The built environment needs all these things. And that stuff will come through later. And he was right, and it did. So I graduated at the top of my class as a result, because I was able to fuse those two things. And then when I got into practice with my business partner, Al, then the thing it allowed us to do at a very young age was convince clients that even though we don't have a lot of built work, and we didn't really have any built work when we started, it's actually why we call it F9 production suits. It's the hotkey on the keyboard to make renderings. And so we were just convincing people that we could design these buildings for them, and that they would perform well, and they would stand up, they wouldn't fall down, coupled with our construction experience. And people trusted us. Enough people trusted us in order to do that, that we could start from nothing. And then I guess I'll answer in 3 ways. So culminating all the way up to where we're at now, where I'm a Class B contractor, I don't think I would be able to be a Class B contractor. I don't think, you got to take a test, and then in our municipality where we operate in Longmont, Colorado, you have to convince the building official that you know what you're doing. I had enough building experience prior to being an architect to where I could show them a portfolio of that, and they rubber stamped it, and now here we are, actually acting as the architect, contractor, and developer on our first development project. So, there's sort of like ups and downs to the whole thing. There's negatives and positives just like anything else, but that's kind of how it translated for me. And I forgot your second question.
The question was, with all the different things that you're into, with construction, with architecture, and with development, how has that experience shaped your business? I mean, one of the follow-up questions I had for you, for example, is, because of your background, do you do a lot of design build work, or do you find yourself pairing up with other contractors and doing just the design?
Both, all of the above. But I'd like to speak a little bit about the design build portion of it. So, the very first design build project that we did in-house was a tiny house, and it was called Atlas. We won an International Architecture Award. We're very proud of it. We were on HGTV, and it had a foldable wall. So it had a deck that folded down, this awning that folded up. It was nothing like the other tiny houses that were out there. And I think the only reason we were able to do that was because we were architects and people with a lot of building knowledge and experience. So we weren't afraid to take the leap that other people who were building these tiny houses were maybe afraid to do, where they could make transformable architecture. We can model everything in Revit in our CAD software, and we can know that we could be very precise in the field because we had that knowledge. And then that led to 2 more tiny houses that we built for Subaru, which those were actually even more transformable. And again, I don't think if we weren't kind of having a foot in both worlds, we wouldn't be able to do it. And the same thing goes for our current development project. There's some very tricky details that we're doing right now where we sort of have these ramps underneath some open tread stairs that go to roofs. And then at the same time, it's still a very commodity-like project in design, where the foundation is completely square. It's 100% a rectangle. It doesn't jog up and down. It doesn't jog left or right if you're looking down at it. But once we got into the framing stage of it, there were little structural, architectural, contractor, like all kind of in one sort of tricks that we did to give it depth. So if anything, it's just been really empowering to to be able to wear all those hats at the same time. It's also very exhausting, as I mentioned before we started recording. But it's like Alex says, he and I were having a heart-to-heart about 2 days ago as he's starting to migrate back into getting back on the job site and in the firm after having his second child, was that it's so stressful to do a design build, but oh man, after it's done, it's like one of the most rewarding. It's like having another child. It really is. It's so rewarding afterwards, because you look back at it and you go, holy cow, we designed it, we built it, we sold it. I mean, the benefits that you reap after that, and then the confidence it gives you. It gives clients even in hiring you, because they know that they just have it's just another level of trust that they can put in you, that whatever you're drawing can turn into reality.
Yeah, well, and I imagine also that it removes that you don't have a problem that many other practitioners do. I hear practitioners talking all the time, and it doesn't matter if they're a small firm practitioner or if they're working in a firm with 2,000 other people, that there's this great kind of divide. It's almost like a cultural difference between contractors and designers. And it creates a lot of real-world problems, when you're working on bigger projects, actually projects of any size. But a buddy of mine, a guy named Mike Lefevre, who spent half of his career working as an architect, as a licensed architect, and half of his career working in a construction company, he just wrote a book called Managing Design, and it's all about how everyone within the design and delivery continuum can help bridge this divide between all the different cultures that they have, right? Architects do things one way, contractors do things another way, engineers do things a third way, etc. But you have the ability, based on your experience, to understand a contractor by truly from their perspective, by being one of them, right? You speak the language like a native.
Absolutely. I mean, and now when you say contractors, the way I interpret that is even subcontractors. They're the ones. Yeah, they're the ones performing work. There was a meme I made, I don't know, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, because it was just an amazing day on the job site that I had the other day, where I had 3 subcontractors come up to me and say, "I've never seen a superintendent carry a nail gun like you." And I go, "What do you mean?" They're like, "At all." And I've just gotten compliments after compliments and compliments from all the subcontractors saying over and over again that when's the next build? When are we going to do the next one? And it's just another level of the trust that, and even the subcontractors now trust us in this very exclusive way, to where they say, "We just want to work with you." And I asked them, like, well, why? And they go, "Well, two things. You get down in the mud with us and do the dirty work, and you're happy about it. And you're here all the time, and you know all the answers." They don't know that I don't know all the answers, but so I must be putting on a good show. But I think what they're asking about is, like, since we drew it, we're not the contractor interpreting an architect's drawings. We're an architect acting as a contractor, just explaining the drawings in as clear detail as possible. I mean, we could pull up the model on the job site, which is incredible to them, and do a quick test fit, because there's always things that change every single time, no matter how hard you try to plan around everything. Every single design build project that we've done, even my own house that I'm sitting in right now, I thought I had it all figured out because we're testing it with the model. And sure, we do 95% of the time, but there's always that 5% of the time where there's a field adjustment that has to be made because you just can't know it all ahead of time. And for us to be able to pull out a laptop on site and sit with the framers and work things out, and so they're not losing time and money as a result, it's just a huge stress reliever for them. I can just see, like, they don't show up to our job site begrudgingly. They show up happily, and that's one of the things they've told me over and over again. It's amazing to hear it. It's a lot of them are Latino background, Latino descent. And that culture is happiness is everything to them. I think even more so than like your standard American. And that's one of the things they've said to me over and over again is they've said, "Are you happy?" And that's a weird thing. I was struck right away. Yeah, I'm very happy. How about you guys? Very happy, very happy. We love working for you. We love working for you. So when you talk about bridging a gap, I think it's exactly that. And it goes all the way down from the subcontractor up to, let's say we were acting as a contractor for another developer, but we were also the architect. I mean, if you can be the glue in between everybody and make everything work, everybody's happy in the end.
Well, and not only are people happy, you've got a positive experience working together, but I have to believe that kind of good communication, good working relationship really helps you stay true to design intent and deliver a better project for your client.
Yeah, absolutely. The best. And so we do practice as an architect in the traditional sense, where there's an owner and a contractor. We're separate from them. Sometimes we do CA, sometimes we don't. But the best, we can tell when it's working really well when we don't get a call. And on some very complicated houses that we designed, some super, super modern ones, where it's just, they're through framing, and I call Brian up and I say, "Brian, how's the framing going?" He goes, "We're done." No calls on that? Very complicated? No. The models were spot on. We've worked with you enough to where we understand your process, you understand our process, and it seems to be a happy marriage.
So I've got some some other questions for you. I know you brought me on here to ask me a few questions, but I'm really intrigued about a few other things. Do you think we can keep going talking about?
Yeah.
So, how much of your practice by percentage is residential versus commercial?
Oh, I would say we're probably at. That's a tough one. We need to do some math at some point. But if I just had to say off the cuff, because we've gotten so many bigger projects lately, probably about 70% residential and 30% commercial.
And within residential, you're primarily talking about custom single-family homes, right? Are you doing
everything? We do everything. It would sometimes it exhausts some of our employees. See, the thing about it is that when Alex and I graduated, we were up on the rooftop of the Hodo, which is a hotel downtown Fargo, after graduation night, and we jokingly said we'll start a firm in 10 years. And right now would be 10 years from now. But the Great Recession hit. I was working for a very high-end boutique firm on Pearl Street in Boulder, Colorado, and Alex is working right off of Wall Street for Daniel Libeskind. We were both doing in our separate ways, doing like the pinnacle of what we wanted to do. I was doing multi-million-dollar homes. He was doing multi-billion-dollar city developments and skyscrapers and things like that. And then we got laid off, and there was no work. And then we found a little bit of work, and then we started this firm. And we've always, that was one of the most painful things in my life, to be laid off like that. Going home to tell my wife, that I lost my job. Al too. We were just heartbroken. And I don't think we'll always have that scar. And so with that scar, we've always just said, we will do just about anything, any kind of style of project, as long as it makes sense. We do stuff that is just as simple as an interior kitchen remodel, all the way up to Alex and his side of the firm are doing some $10 million plus mixed-use developments where there's single-family, multifamily, and commercial stuff on the first floor. A couple of my guys are doing 5-plexes, 7-plexes. The cannabis industry down here is out of control, so a lot of people are doing CBD extraction plants. We do stuff like that. We do tend to finishes. We are just all over the map, and our idea is, if we could, we're going to be as diverse as possible, always, because we never want to send our guys home to their wives and tell them that they lost their job. So we're going to do our best to have as many sticks in the fire as we can, and so that it doesn't go out.
Is most of your work in and around Longmont?
It's not. We are licensed in 3 states: Idaho, North Dakota, Colorado. Most of our work is in Colorado. We do consulting for other firms, though, all over the United States, East Coast, West Coast. We've done some consulting for overseas firms where it's just building information modeling. So we're taking their building products like Windows and putting them into Revit. We used to have a great partnership with ArcCAD, who's a wonderful sponsor of this podcast now, where we built most of their models for Revit. But primarily with architecture, it's up and down the Front Range in Colorado. So it goes all the way from Fort Collins all the way down to Colorado Springs. So we operate in probably at any given time, maybe 24 different jurisdictions, counties and cities all over Colorado. A lot of stuff in Denver, Boulder County, our real estate developments in Longmont. We're all over the place.
So was that by design, or did that come about based on reacting to what opportunities were out there?
Both. It was by design, but then we just, if there was opportunities, we took them. One of the most interesting things that I noticed when I used to work for that firm in Boulder, right before they went under, and then I got laid off, is I was trying to segue them into getting some government work, because that was the only thing that was really there for a while was government funded work. And so I distinctly remember going into a meeting with my cousin, who kind of was doing a lot of these government contracts. And he point blank asked that principal that I was working for, "How are you guys marketing yourselves?" And it looked like a deer in the headlights. And the principal said, "Well, it's just all word of mouth." And I just had this epiphany. And so I went back home and looked and checked out the internet, and it was just looking for Colorado architects. And I realized that there was this giant hole in the Colorado market, and there probably still is, in multiple states throughout the United States, where architects are just not marketing themselves in a business standpoint. It's all about, well, Nancy knows John, and then John, and they all run in this very wealthy circle, and we're just going to do 1%er houses and stuff like that. And so since we were so hungry, and since nobody was taking advantage of that, we took to social media, and we have a great Facebook presence, Instagram, Twitter, and then our website. And then we actually started using Google AdWords, which landed us clients in like South Dakota, of all places. Somehow there's not, one of the guys who hired us from South Dakota we said, "Why did you hire a Colorado firm?" And he goes, "Well, there's no good ones in South Dakota." I don't know if that's still true or whatever, but that's how we got that. And then we built upon not only just the architecture website and marketing and literally outward marketing, using Thumbtack, Angie's List. Like, we were not afraid to dip our toes into that stuff. Where I think a lot of other, what I like to call capital A architects, where got the Corbusier glasses on, and they kind of like look down on a master bedroom addition, off the back of a house. Where we said, well, money's green, and if we embrace that, and we follow one of our favorite books is The Lean Startup, and so if we follow that kind of practice, keep our salaries low, just where we can live off them, and what we've done is, in that kind of practice is we always have extra. We look more profitable than maybe we are because our salaries are much lower than what a typical principal is. But that allows us to do things like put money towards, spend money on that first tiny house that we built, put all this kind of money that we've had to put towards the development to get that off the ground, and we sort of just keep leapfrogging up and up and up, to bigger rocks as we move ahead. So it was by design, and then whatever opportunities come our way, we're selective at a certain level. But generally, if it makes sense, we'll try the project out.
So when you take a look at all the different kinds of work that you do you ever make decisions to take on a project or not take on a project purely based on profit, or are there other factors that go into what you decide to take on versus what you decide to pass on?
We try to look for red flags. And that's taken a while to understand, like what a good red flag is. Not a good red flag, just one that's very obvious. One of them is if we get an email from a potential client, or maybe it's a follow-up email after the initial phone call or a meet and greet, and it is over a page long. It is just this rambling giant list. That's a no. That is a red flag. This is a management issue, and you're never going to get those clients not under control, but just in sync with you is the way I would describe it. And we had to learn it the hard way. We had to go through a couple clients, or to have a couple clients and accept a couple clients like that for us to go, we're never doing that again. I think we ended up with kind of mutually firing each other on a few instances and said we're never doing that again. Regarding profitability, I actually just had an employee ask me a question the other day about this. He wasn't very happy about it. This little condo project that we took on in Boulder, and because it was more of an interior design project than anything. And so he asked, well, why did we take that on? It doesn't seem profitable at all. And so I broke down the numbers for him and proved to him that it was profitable. But then I gave other examples about of how maybe we took it on the nose with a house that I really like that's on our website. It's called Jazz House. I went and looked at the fees for that, and we did that in 2012, so We had only been around for maybe 2 years. That client came to me, and we were very hungry at that point. It was just me and Alex. When that client came to me, and they had this very unique shape of land, it was literally a triangle piece of land, and they said to me, we want our house to be an icon in Denver. We want it to be an iconic house. So I gave them a very, very good price, something that would be about 25% of what we charge now. And I explained to one of my employees who was aggravated by some of the projects we were taking on, and I said, look, here's an example of sometimes why you do take on certain clients and maybe why you cut a fee down or something just because you need that portfolio piece. And I explained to him in sequence about how that taking on that client, getting that built, getting that portfolio, establishing a relationship with this particular contractor, then led us to this other typology that we do, which is assisted living group homes. They're like 16-bed group homes, 8,000 square feet, very profitable for our firm. And they're also feel good work because we're doing stuff for a protected class of Americans who need it. They have Alzheimer's and dementia and everything like that. But after I laid that whole process out for him, everything clicked, and he goes, "Oh, okay. Well, I just needed to put in perspective." So it's tricky. Which ones we'll take on and which ones we won't from a profitability standpoint, and it's a gamble, right? But that's what I'm doing every day as an entrepreneur, is gambling. I always like to say that we wake up broke. You're hungry, you're broke every single day, and you got to push a rock up a mountain.
That's a really, I love that expression that you just used. Wake up broke every day. The founder of our firm is a guy named Jim Kramer, and he used to say he spent every day running scared. But it's the same basic idea. I like your version better.
Oh, thanks.
Earlier, you were talking about marketing, and you said that you noticed that there was really a lack of architects marketing themselves in your local market. And later, you were talking about having these discussions where folks who worked at your firm were sort of challenging some of the decisions, the profitability decisions that you were making and taking on various projects. How, in your last 10 years, have you seen any change in attitudes among architects toward marketing, specifically in business generally?
They seem to embrace social media a lot more, but I always question the return on social media. I think what you can gain from social media, from our perspective, is that you always have to have a presence wherever you can. But I don't think you're getting instant clients. I think it's a long-term investment, because I think people will follow you on whatever platform they're looking at for a long time before they finally have saved enough money to buy that piece of land, or they have enough equity in their current house where they can do their remodel and stuff like that. I think one of the most interesting things that I've seen is that so many architects want to do the design build track at this point. And I've already elaborated on how that's been beneficial for us in all the different kinds of ways. But that's probably been the most exciting move recently, is architects embracing becoming a contractor and what I would call retaking the master builder position again. There's an architect out of who's one of our bigger competitors. We actually just came out of that project I was talking about earlier with my Al Gore's doing. I think he took himself from a $1 million gross last year or the year before to $4 million, and that's actually where we're projected to go with our development project too. As a conglomerate business, there are all these different entities for legal reasons and separations. You don't have the whole stack of cards and dominoes fall over, but that multiplier effect of taking on more responsibility is what I've seen, and that's most exciting to me from a professional standpoint.
There really is a relationship between your willingness to embrace risk, as difficult as it feels, and what you can come away from in terms of profit, but not just profit. Really, there's all kinds of benefits in terms of control of the quality of your work, and the ability to not sacrifice design intent.
Yeah. The other thing I really like about architects taking on a little bit more, doing more builds. Even if they're just acting as a general contractor, they're not doing the development portion of it. I just had Nicholas Renard on the podcast a couple weeks ago. One of the best pieces of advice I think I've ever heard so far about when you take on that role is your ability to extend cash flow and just staying alive if the economy tanks again. Because if you have projects that you've designed and you've convinced the client, or they've asked you and you want to work with them in a contractor capacity, if the permit is pulled, if the financing is set and you have shovel-ready projects, but the economy crashes, if they're still funded, that could stretch you out, 2 or 3 years. And if that's all the dip is, hopefully the next one, then while architecture work kind of goes away, or is at least very scarce, you're out there with a hard hat doing your thing. You're still eating very well. You'd have to lay anybody off. And I think not having to lay anybody off, just emotional stuff aside that I already talked about, but being able to maintain. If you're a small firm like us, we're a firm of 7. Being able to maintain that core group of people who believe in what you're doing, work hard every day, but more than that, understand the process and the processes internally, and not having to find somebody else and retrain them again is so valuable. Because if you can maintain that group of people in a lull, this is what I believe anyway, we haven't tested it out, but that's what we're hoping for, is in that lull and you come out of it, you could do something like franchise. I think you could start doing at branches, or you could double the staff at that point, because all of a sudden you have people who can basically you can replace yourself, right? Because those people know all the ins and outs of the firm, and all of a sudden you can just concentrate on doing, okay, I'm just going to do sales. I already have a staff who can do all the drawings, all the submittals, and managing the projects.
It gives you a lot more flexibility as a business owner and as a professional, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, one of the things that I've observed over the time where I've been focused on the AEC industry, and I'm really happy to see it, is when I first began serving this industry, I had come from other industries where, let's just say, there were some more, I don't want to sound snotty or anything, but there were some more sophisticated attitudes toward things like marketing. And there was a much greater kind of cultural resistance in architecture toward things like marketing and toward things like business. Now, you always had savvy people who knew how to market in architecture, and you always had people who were committed to running a good business. And those folks were very often doing some of the best work. So there really wasn't any reason why somebody would have to believe that there's a trade-off between running a good business and doing great design, or doing the kind of projects that would, where not everything's a bread and butter project, but some of them are actually quite creatively rewarding to do. And what I've been really excited to see is architects becoming much more sophisticated in how they look at marketing themselves and how they look at running their businesses, where they're dropping this idea that there's some sellout component to marketing yourself or to focusing on your business. You mentioned earlier that you had done a episode called Designing Your Business, and I think that that's a very healthy way to look at it for someone who's coming from a creative background. But more than that, I think it's also just a very accurate way to look at what the experience can be like of being an entrepreneur who is running a business, and that's in essence what any small firm architect is.
Yeah, I'm also very happy that to hear that architects are. It's not a bad thing to market yourself finally, because you can't. What's it? Yeah. Because what's interesting is if we ever hit a slow period again, I have all these ideas about data that I'd like to dissect on what has occurred over the last 10 years with our firm. When we have the most inquiries coming in per month or quarter, or when is typically the slow spot? What is the lull? Well, one that I've always been interested in is what would we consider a rock star project compared to a bread and butter project, and what is the percentage of rock star projects that we're doing on an annual basis compared to just bread and butter ones? Because I think it would help. I think everybody that comes out of architecture school, or at least most people, have the perception that they're just going to be doing cool buildings all day long. Because even our website is disingenuous in the way that we're only showing our best stuff. We're only showing the stuff that we kind of want to do over and over again, in the sense that it is, high-end modern or high-end craftsman, something that they spend a fair amount of money on per square foot. But behind that hood is a lot of bread and butter that allowed us to get there. So, having that kind of data set and showing employees, and then, I think it would give them perspective. But then the second thing I think it would do is give them a greater appreciation for when they do get that quote unquote rock star project put on their plate, and they're the project designer.
Well, it makes a lot of sense that that's what people would see, because if that's the kind of work that you want, you got to put out there in the world what it is that you want to get back. So I guess one of the questions that I would have is not just what's the percentage of rockstar projects versus bread and butter projects, but what was the process that you went through to find those rockstar projects and to bring them in? So in other words, is there something repeatable in that experience? Was there an avenue, a marketing avenue or communication avenue that you used that helped get you out there into the right audience, right? To the kind of people who are going to hire you to do rockstar projects. Are there any levers that you can press that will help you get more of that kind of work? Now, earlier you made several references to the downturn. And I don't think that we should use language like if a downturn happens. I think we should use language like when a downturn happens, because it's just the way of things. Downturns happen all the time. We have quite a historically long recovery since the Great Recession, if you look at it, technically like an economist would, but it's not unprecedented. There's a recovery in Australia, for instance, that's almost twice as long as ours. So it's not historically unprecedented, but I think everybody would be smart if they had a plan for what to do in case something goes awry. So there's one of the people in our strategic advisory group, just a brilliant guy in running organizations, and his name is Glenn Morrison, and he talked about this concept called mapping the downturn. He used to be the global CEO for Tarkett, so he was running a multi-billion-dollar company. And prior to doing the global role, he was in charge of all of Tarkett's U.S. operations. And he said he went in there when he first got there, and his first program was to tell all of his people, hey, I want you to get me a plan for what happens when 25% of our business goes away. Now, times were really good, and they were making all kinds of money at the time, so people thought he was a little bit nuts, and he kept insisting, no, I want you to give me a plan for what we would do if 25% of our business went away overnight. So they wound up coming up with a plan for that Glenn called mapping the downturn. And they went ahead and started to make some of the improvements to the company and cut some of the things that they needed to cut. And when the downturn did come, they actually wound up making more money than they ever had because they were already ready. Now, that's a story on a really, really big scale, but it absolutely goes all the way down to a solo practitioner, because anybody who went through the last Great Recession understands that you can have virtually all your pipeline dry up, and you can have signed contracts canceled. And these things can happen in these things can happen overnight, and they can happen at a big scale. So my question would be, have you thought about how it is that you might map the downturn for your firm?
You know what's interesting about this last question is this is sort of how I was gonna ask you the last question that is almost verbatim of what you've been going on, and it was going to be, what is one piece of advice you'd give a small firm architect or business owner as we near the end of this business cycle? Because I think it's possible we're there. Like you said, because it's been about 10 years since Wall Street went under and the whole mess that happened there. But then we could be like Australia, where it's doubled. Who knows? There's a couple. My wife is an investor, and she runs with some other investors. And I always ask them about charts. What is the chart saying? If you look at a 3-year of the Dow, what could happen? A lot of them say it could double, honestly, which is kind of crazy. But they go, if it doubles, then you really got to be worried once it doubles. Then what goes up must come down. So I think this is a good place to end our conversation today. What I would do is, our focus is debt. We have incurred debt. We incurred some debt when we built the first tiny house, which then catapulted us all the second ones, the development, and now obviously we have a $2 million loan we have to pay off on December 1st of 2019, and we're almost there. We almost have all of them sold. But our goal is to completely, kind of going back to what I said earlier too, is it's time for I think our firm to, if we've been around for 10 years, to sort of come up with a business plan, a true business plan, and start streamlining things and pay off debt. It's like the old cliche that everybody says, debt, just get rid of as much debt as you can. So our goal is to completely rid our architecture company of any debt that we have whatsoever, and then operate purely in cash from here on out, pay off the credit card each month. This is all after the development is hopefully sold in the next couple months, and then even pay off our personal debt. So it's my personal goal to pay off my mortgage with the profits that come from our development, and my Suburban that I drive around. That's a company Suburban. But to just streamline the whole thing, ratchet everything down, and then I want to go through our bank statements and see if there's any extraneous stuff that we're spending money on, and really understand where everything is at. And then the final piece of it is, because we're sort of at this 10-year mark, is to have sort of a retreat with the firm. And Alex and I have been talking about this in the past couple of weeks about how do we, at what point do you show everybody what everybody's making? Do you do that? Do you not do that? Or do you just show it from a firm standpoint? You say, look, here's what F9 grossed last year. Here's what all the salaries cost. Here's all the extra stuff that cost, that we had to spend money on. And then here's the money that we had profitability-wise. And then have some tough discussions with them, each employee or as a collective, and say, hey, what if 25% or 50% of our work goes away? Look at what would happen to the profit line. Are you guys prepared to, possibly ratchet down to only working 4 or 3 days a week? How do we be as lean as possible, and maybe even hand them a book, like the Lean Startup or something that's updated like that, and kind of get everybody thinking like that again. Because I think it's so easy. That's the thing, again, the scar that has never went away from Alex and I hope it never does, is really always trying to be like a lean startup, even though we're a tenured firm at this point, I think is critical. And no matter how, it's so easy for everybody to, while we're all eating so well right now with this amazing economy, it's so easy to lose track of that just because you're suffocating in work and you aren't planning ahead a little bit, because it could just, the rug can get pulled out from underneath you. It was that quick in 2009, and it's bound to happen again. Maybe not as catastrophic, but those are the things that we're trying to do. I think just debt is really simple. If you can get rid of it, get rid of it.
Well, there's a lot of wisdom in what you're saying, but there's always this balance to hit, right? Because, I'm attracted to the idea of lean growth. In other words, there's you're running your organization without any waste, but you're reinvesting smartly in the business, which you talked about how important that was to you at the beginning of our discussion. But the idea is you don't want to go so far that you're playing only defense before the downturn, right? It's about playing smart offense, and part of it's about going after a healthy top line, which sometimes you have to invest to do. And by that I mean you're going to have to invest in things like marketing, and it's not just cash, but it's actually time. And if you're putting your time into marketing, you're not putting your time into other more directly billable stuff. But at the same time, you're going to need to run a business where the bottom line is quite healthy too, and that goes back to the trimming that you're talking about. Debt is another interesting question. There's a lot of factors into to decide whether in one individual's case versus another, whether it makes sense for them to use debt. You guys use debt in what hopefully will be a very smart way to do the development and to get into that line of business, to have your first go of it profitable, which is wonderful. But then also now you have the knowledge of how to do it. You've got that experience, and you had to leverage. You had to use leverage in order to get that experience. So it's just a question of balancing out what the potential positives are in your situation versus what the size and type of the risks are, and then making a decision that's right for you. Generally speaking, though, a lot of those traditional business principles, like avoiding unproductive debt or covering up poor operations by debt. Cash covers a lot of sin, and it's when times are good, it can be very easy to look away from. Let's just say you've got people who are not contributing to the level that you need them to based on the salary that you're giving them, or there's some other way that you're not spending intelligently on your overhead. Now's the time to fix those kind of things, balanced out with something that I think you were referring to before, when you said you really want to keep your people and that there's such tremendous benefit to doing so. Money and people have to be kept in balance, right? Because at the end of the day, any of us who are in professional services, it's really all about talent and people, and making sure that we're positioning ourselves to always be at the best for both of those. So in terms of someone who's got a solo practice or a small firm, I think a lot of it is just making sure that if you feel that there are deficiencies in your business education, that you go ahead and get those, right? And understand what the strong fundamentals are of running a business of any kind, and make sure that you are doing that in your own business. It's something where, and again, I don't want to overplay this idea that people are resistant to all these businessy kind of ideas. I mean, I was actually talking with a firm principal about an hour before we started chatting, and they're about 120 person firm that's in the Midwest, and this guy was saying, I couldn't put together a spreadsheet if you paid me to. And he was talking about how he's resistant to it. He's a creative person. That's really what's important to him. In that size of organization, thank goodness he's got other people other architects in their firm who are paying attention to the spreadsheet. And what I would encourage this principal to know is that there doesn't need to be a contradiction between creativity and running a smart business. In fact, what you can do is you can leverage your unique perspective as a creative person to run your business your way, as long as it makes sense, as long as it's in line with good fundamentals, fundamentals of running any kind of business, especially a professional service firm.
Yeah, they're paramount. And I think people do have resistances, like that. Some fundamental things that I would just rattle off is if you're just a sole proprietor, you should still have QuickBooks. You should have a part-time bookkeeper. Trust me, it's going to pay off. It saves Alex and I so much time. We took the leap, I think, 6 years ago and got a bookkeeper 7 years ago. It's huge. And then the other one is if you can consistently pay yourself a bi-monthly or monthly or weekly salary and put yourself, you literally become a W-2 employee, even if you're a sole practitioner. The reason why I always like to talk about that is that it has allowed us to leverage credit and in a smart way. Kind of, what you talked about earlier is that, we've done that. Banks like to check boxes. Bankers do. They're not. There's some good bankers out there. I work with them often, but they're not really creative people. And they can't be because they have to check boxes. And one of the boxes they like to check, if you want to go get a mortgage, if you want to maybe even just buy a piece of land and you're going to be one little development, do stuff like that, or you need office equipment and you need some credit, they need to see that you're consistently getting a consistent paycheck, you're being consistent. So those kind of fundamental things, although they are mundane, but if you think about how you can use those mundane things in a creative way, I think echoes perfectly with your sentiment. So, Bob,
or how you can solve those problems creatively by using tools and using resources outside of yourself to get people to help you with those areas that you may not feel particularly strong in, or they don't line up with what your skill set or what your interests are.
Yeah, exactly. Bob, this has been an awesome conversation. I feel like I could talk to you for another 2 hours, but I do have to get back to the job site. So I just want to thank you for coming on Inside the Firm today. And then how can people follow you? Are you on Twitter? I know you're on LinkedIn. How can people get in touch with you?
Yes, and so I'm also on Twitter at Bob Fisher ATL. So take a look there. And DesignIntelligence is at DINET, DINET. And probably the best way though is to connect with me via LinkedIn.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, we'll have to have you back on down the road. Again, really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, sounds great. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.